On March 23, 1958, Sidney Barringer jumps from the ninth floor rooftop of his apartment building in an attempted suicide. Sidney is hit with a shotgun blast as he passes the sixth-story window, only to be caught by a net installed for painters the previous day, which would have saved his life had he not been killed only moments prior. This unexplainable event, which opens Paul Thomas Anderson's film Magnolia, embodies the elements of coincidence and chance found in architectural expressions of idiosyncrasy. Redefined as the expression of unexplainable, unpredictable, and unaccountable phenomenon perceived through attentiveness to the anomalies of chance, idiosyncrasy drove an investigation of Charles Fort and his Book of the Damned. Recipient of a substantial inheritance in his youth, Fort spent the rest of his life in libraries in London and New York researching impossible occurrences, impossibilities of prevailing scientific perspectives that were nonetheless well documented and attested to by multiple observers. A similar process of calling foundational assumptions about human experience and environment into question can redefine the 21st century understanding of architecture and spacemaking as dependent upon chance phenomena and unpredictability. What imaginative programs would derive from a logic of the unexplained, like frogs falling from the sky? To address this question, an assemblage is constructed exploring the nuance and interwoven dependence of the relationships in Magnolia. Given physical form through a contraption which references the joyful complexity and dysfunction of Heath Robinson's inventions, the elements of the assemblage derive from emotions and agents of chance which generate human connections within the film. The sequence of events is as follows. Dislocated from its appropriate outdoor context, the inverted bicycle is reduced to a complicated mechanism for seemingly inconsequential movements. A spoke on the wheel is created by the numbers 8 and 2 in sequence, which creates a cause and effect reaction within its interdependent elements. The chain of events is propagated by a path of dependence. Fear illuminates the surroundings, searching for comfort, causing the domestic blanket to fail and keeping the unsightly chain covered. The cycles of dysfunction and regret create the isolation of the protagonists, who are met with the agents of cruelty that appear to restrict the unpredictability of chance. The final character escapes the inevitable by extending outwards from the frame's control. This sequence of anomalous intersections cannot be explained, but it did happen. Based on these initial explorations and definitions, the project brief is developed by crafting a new understanding of chance in terms of the built environment. Emerging from a process of research catalogs, the Diomede Islands are set forth as the project site because they encompass the emotional complexities, interdependencies, and inexplicability of the Magnolia reference and the assemblage narrative. Located in the middle of the Bering Strait, at the easternmost tip of Siberia or the western extreme of Alaska, depending on your perspective, the twin outposts are known as Tomorrow Island and Yesterday Isle. Separated only by a 30-meter surface of water less than 4 kilometers across and the human constructs of the international dateline and the Russian-American border, when the same sun sets on the islands, it is tomorrow on the Russian Diomede and yesterday on the American. Understanding the past functions the islands have served, along with their current position between world powers and the opening Arctic trade routes, led to speculation about their appropriation in a future political strategy. Like the Soviet Union creating a dam across the Diomedes in J.G. Ballard's fictional 20th century, a 21st century America in decline is driven by intensifying concerns around resources, military conflict, and extreme weather to bring the world stage to their border with Russia. In desperation, America's Yesterday Isle seeks to become as big, if not bigger, than its counterpart. The layers of intrigue and interdependence encompassed by this geography guide the formulation of the project's critical thinking. Framed by the problem of relations, where the reflection we see in our neighbor is always too close to home, the notion of chance is internalized in an architectural relationship. Its cause is the chaos of the environment, where even apparent stasis is in a state of transition, making prediction impossible. And the effect is the spatial outcome, where the past reaches out for the future, whether in good or bad faith, in futility. Nostalgic for their leveraged position during the Cold War, the American government relocates the United Nations along the Russian border as a bargaining chip to dissuade the extraction of Arctic oil reserves and to re-establish themselves as the protagonists in the new soft war of climate change. Just as the decision to place the original UN headquarters in New York resulted from a series of dubious political agreements, moving it into the eye of the climate change storm to inform policy also works as a guise for political espionage. From its new vantage point at the confluence of multiple paths of dispute, the Security Council on the Diomedes becomes the new stage for the performance of global conflicts. Working as a metaphor for America's desperation to retain its status, the project is a purely Hollywood creation, relying on illusions, resourcefulness, and precise choreography with the weather to create the image of a new American regime. In an early indication of the effects of poor policy, the existing town of Diomedes sees its population dwindle to zero before being replaced by intelligence agents who act out the roles of locals and give America backroom access and oversight to any goings-on within the council. Similarly, the development and construction of the new UN capitalizes on the shroud of secrecy granted by the numerous obscuring site conditions, like fog, low light, Arctic mirages, and glare from snow and ice. America puts its greatest asset to work, using the spatial trickery and efficient visual sets of Hollywood to enhance the perception of their contributions to global diplomacy. Every aspect of the proceedings is meticulously planned and orchestrated by a series of architectural props. Though these occurrences appear as mere showy coincidence of the environment to the visiting constituents, they are no matter of chance. Along with the iconic horseshoe formation of the Security Council table, which creates the site plan, the symbol of the crane and the longevity it bestows are co-opted from the mural to serve as a warning signal. Preempting the migration of real cranes from China and Russia towards the Arctic Circle, mechanical counterparts are deployed in an attempt to broker diplomacy around environmental protection. These mechanisms protect the fragile balance of the institution on the Diomedes below from chance occurrences of falling debris. Their secondary purpose is the cooling of the site via reflective wing panels, which assist in controlling mirages by creating a temperature gradient. Upon landing, they create large-scale messages by aligning towards the lookout on the opposite island, Russia's Big Diomede. The ambassador accommodation quarters, constructed by America, which form the perimeter of the new negotiation table, internalize the maxim, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Reaching across the border, they latch on to Russia's contribution to the new United Nations, a series of Potemkin lanterns which project the silhouettes of delegates hard at work. While this is construed as an embrace, it can also be seen as an inadvertent means of keeping each other at arm's length. Under the guise of environmental protection, preventing sea level rise, and cooling the Arctic, the USA performs a covert land reclamation of the ice flows in the Bering Strait. They surreptitiously salvage drifting ice to grow the footprint of the American Little Diomede year-round, creating a landmass ever closer to the surface area of the Russian Big Diomede. The gift of world diplomacy in the form of the UN headquarters is akin to the Trojan horse, disguising the export of American nuclear waste to the farthest corner of their territory. The new American architectural espionage is offered as a model of sustainable environmental design, generating warmth for the delegates' accommodations and diplomacy at the speakers' tables. On years where the supply of ice is low, decoys are deployed from the American workshops. The cool temperatures and abundant water make the site a promising solution for the issue of nuclear waste piling up on the west coast. Arriving with building materials from mainland Alaska, containers are crafted in a variety of shapes, blending into the ice surfaces which create the horseshoe table. Like the Jekyll and Hyde quality known to exist in the current Security Council, the project's metaphorical table seeks to embody a similar quality, with the Russian-facing assembly artificially inflating its image through the trickery and props of Hollywood, while the understated American bases on the back of the island earnestly seek solutions to the world's most pressing problems. These bases hide beneath the new energy source for the UN infrastructure, a series of hydroelectric potential reservoirs that pump water to the island's peak with unreliable sources of renewable power to be accessed when delegates arrive. The inhabitable columns house the workshop staff responsible for managing the shifting site conditions. To create a more hospitable environment, these spaces are insulated by sleeves extending from the pools above, which provide nesting space for birds in the summer months and freeze with the building's steam runoff to protect from winter winds. The workshop itself is an exercise in spatial trickery, hiding in plain sight and set into the large valley on the far end of the American island. Shielded from overhead view by the hovering water batteries, sightlines are limited to direct approaches by water. From this perspective, a series of panels align to create the illusion of an insignificant boathouse, which, in reality, extends into a long hangar space for the fabrication of architectural props. The American agents constantly observe the UN infrastructure, keeping track of seasonal variations in ice, temperature, and migratory animals. Based on these observations, the American workshop attempts to affect policy decisions with its props, deploying nuclear waste storage disguised as submerged ice flows, mechanical cranes, and Siberian pine tree billboards. Just as the location of the current UN headquarters arose from the positioning of America as the global superpower, the new site suspended between continents along the international dateline indicates a new set of priorities for the 21st century based on global cooperation and attentiveness to the shifting conditions of environment and relationships. Finally, the site's highly variable light informs the schedule of the United Nations General Assembly. The midnight sun, which illuminates the table constantly in the last half of June, allows for impossible productivity which is broadcast to the world, while the near total darkness of 12 noon in December provides excellent cover for the setup of next year's show. The ascension of delegations to the site traces a path from mainland Alaska up to the international dateline. Their gathering visually communicates a collective desire for peace across the strait to the isolated Russian military base. Through the lens of the tumultuous, ever-changing weather of the Diomede Islands, the perception of good and evil, right and wrong, become clouded. Even seemingly well-intentioned actions can be understood to have hidden agendas and alternate consequences when viewed through the distortions of chance. Under such circumstances, the best policy may be to keep one's enemies as close as possible.